Jr. Show. Appreciate you joining us. And as I mentioned to you before, we're going to have on someone that really needs no introduction if you live in the greater Washington metropolitan area, or as the young people call it, the DMV, because this gentleman's been covering the sports scene in town for years. And I get the privilege of seeing him out at Commanders Park, formerly Redskins Park, covering the Washington Commanders. And we're talking about none other than Mr. Rick Snider. Rick, you've come on with me in the past, and Rick Snider's Washington. You're a historian. You're a guy that talks about many different things. What's it like now to see this team looking like the teams that you used to cover, say, like in the 80s and early 90s?
Yeah, well, first off, the young people call it DMV, which is stupid, but the old people call it Washington with an R. That's how you can tell who's an old Washingtonian, sixth generation myself. So anyway, I didn't think we'd ever see these days again. I mean, it was great back in the 80s and 90s. I was a young reporter, so I didn't appreciate it, with 4 Super Bowl seasons and 3 wins and eight, 9 years. And, you just saw it was going on forever. And then Cook died and it all went away, and Dan Snyder came and it all got worse. And, I really thought we were done, and I was going to retire until Dan Snyder suddenly said, "I'm thinking of selling." And I thought, okay, I'm sticking around. I was tired of such evil, empire kind of things. So, ironically, across town, the Nationals are finding out what this is like, and their only solution is to sell the team too. So,
Yeah. And you see a lot of teams being sold. Obviously, the Lakers just sold for a record-breaking deal. I think to the tune of $10 billion.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
heard of. So if you have deep pockets, now's the time to buy some professional franchise. And when you look at the Commanders, Josh Harris bought this team. You're the perfect person to ask this, because I've talked about it off record, but we're on record now. So I wanted to get your take on, could you foresee a time when maybe Josh Harris were to sell the Philadelphia 76ers because the Commanders could be like his ultimate cash cow?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, he's got an NHL team too, and he owns part of a soccer team. And these rich guys, they got money everywhere, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he's as big a basketball, hockey guy as he is a football guy, and he's a Washingtonian, by birth. So the other ones are businesses. This is personal, and so I could see him getting rid of the others. Maybe he has to do it to fund this new stadium or whatever.
Yeah.
Those are worth. I mean, I think 76 would be worth a lot.
Yeah. And, I was thinking, Rick, the love from Philadelphia, obviously the Commanders are going to be in a heated, rivalry, if you want to call it that. It's kind of hard to say Commanders Eagles rivalry, but the NFC East rivalry. But yeah, those are two teams that are jockeying for a Super Bowl. The Eagles are defending champion. So you kind of wonder how Josh Harris's stay in Philadelphia is going to be welcomed if the Commanders are battling the Eagles all the time and he's the owner of the Sixers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I do think it's hard. If you're a Wizards fan, I guess there's 3 or 4 left, and you kind of just say, this guy's going the other side. Just like, remember when Harper was wearing the Las Vegas Knights hat to the Stanley Cup, and everybody just went wild over that. He's like, you're a Washington guy.
Right.
That's not quite how they see it, all the time. But, and look at, Jayden Daniels is a Lakers fan, grew up that way. And they're entitled to it. They're from somewhere else. Just don't show it here.
Yeah,
That's the one thing.
Can't show up to a Wizards game sitting courtside with the Lakers jersey on. That might not sit well. You remember years ago, John Wall showed up to a Redskins game with the Cowboys jersey on, and that didn't endear him to the fan base at all.
Yeah, I actually think the Eagles rivalry is now going to become bigger than the Cowboys, because the Cowboys rivalry was your fathers and grandfathers, and Dallas, they haven't played for anything against each other in so long, and the Cowboys don't quite see it, the rivalry anymore either. But the Philly thing, they're closer. How many Pennsylvanians are down here in Washington? Tons of them.
A lot.
Dallas fans are just miscreants that showed up. They always said if you were a Dallas fan growing up in Washington, you hated your family or whatever. It was just, and it's probably true. So just trying to be opposite.
It's funny that you say that you think Washington and Philadelphia is going to be the next rivalry? Because I've been saying it for weeks now that I think that they're getting ready to become the league's rivalry, meaning, what maybe Pittsburgh and Baltimore recently has been. I really feel like that because, first of all, they have two young quarterbacks and they have quarterbacks that have staying power. Jalen Hurts, for everything you say about him as a quarterback and he can't do this, he can't do that. Well, what he can do is he wins, and he just won a Super Bowl, and he was in a Super Bowl a couple years previously. So, I think that they have staying power. And I know in the area where we're from, we're both Washingtonians. The Cowboys, Redskins at the time, that rivalry was huge, but it was because it was meaningful. They were playing for something. Well, Cowboys aren't playing for anything, at least not at the moment, and the Eagles and Washington are. So that's why I think the Eagles Washington rivalry trumps now Dallas Washington.
Yeah, and it's become a cliche for the fans to say we want Dallas. It, partly because they just didn't have anything else to really root for. But as you say, now you have two teams that are going to dominate each other for a while with the young players. Philly has a good front office that put it together well. Washington has one, so they should stay. The Giants, I don't know where they're going to end up in this, but third, or something, or fourth. The Cowboys will always be the Cowboys. But I do think it's, because you have a lot of Pennsylvanians. My cousin married an Eagles fan. I don't know what to do with him.
Half my family's from Philly, so yeah.
It's just like that. I mean, I married a woman from Pennsylvania family too. So, it's not even Yankees; they're Eagles. That's even worse, kind of thing. So it's funny. I even have a nutritionist I do on Zoom. She's based in Philly. She says, "How's the football going down there?" I said, "Well, the Commanders finished minicamp. They figured out how to beat the Eagles, so we're all done. We're taking off for a while." And she starts yelling at me. So it's getting that way, and that's fine because they are, 2-hour drive apart. That's a great thing too. There's a lot of great rivalries in the league. Chicago, Green Bay is, in a way, they haven't played for anything in a long time, but they're bitter, man. There's people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they hate each other there. And the reason why I know that this is Washington and Philadelphia, Rick, is becoming that rivalry because I see a lot of Eagles fans coming into my comments. I see a lot of Eagles
Mhm.
fans watching these type of shows with Washington media, folks like ourselves, and they're commenting, and it's a real thing. And I go back to the NFC Championship game, up in Philadelphia, and I remember, we're not supposed to, but hey, I took a little pit stop and saw some friends in a suite up there, and it was an all Eagles suite, full of season ticket holders, older gentlemen, and they literally said that they're not looking forward to number 5 coming up there every year because they feel like that this is getting ready to be a budding rivalry. So I think the fans of Philadelphia have recognized that Washington has something that they've never had, in my opinion, in the history of this franchise. Maybe you go back to Sammy Ball, and that's a franchise quarterback in Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, you really do have to go back to Ball. And if we're talking about greatest players ever, well, Ball also a different era of football, but played defensive back and punter and was a record punter.
Yeah.
So he had 3 positions he was great at. So JD, you got to work some magic to get that far. But after that, what are you going to say? Sonny, but Sonny never got to the playoffs,
And some
strangely enough.
Eagles too, after he had already had some success as well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That I mean, they haven't had a homegrown guy. Joe was a Miami pick that they got out of the CFL, but still, I think Joe Theismann was one of the great quarterbacks who doesn't get recognized nearly as well by fans as he should.
Yeah.
Because Joe won 85 games. You know how many games Doug Williams won?
What, 7, 8?
Yeah, 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 5. Yeah. So, but he won big ones,
Wow.
And I love Doug.
And Joe Theismann has an MVP under his name too.
Right. And he had 85 wins, the most of any. He made 2 Super Bowls, lost 1. I mean, Joe's just below the Hall of Fame. And yet, what happened is he made Sonny and Billy mad, and they poisoned the public against Joe, and it's never recovered from that.
Wow, and I was told about that story as well, and it's a sad thing, Well, now the good thing is that I mean, and you're a person that's covered this team for a long time. You're a historian at the same time. Is it safe to say though that this is probably Washington's first? I don't want to use the word marquee player because they've had some really good players here, but you and I both know that the organization, in the 2000s, they did a marketing job with some of their players where they kind of inflated them, so to speak, in town and then around the league. Those players weren't looked at as those type of players. Well, now you have one in Jayden Daniels. The league is literally marketing. Hence, they're going to be playing over in Spain this year. So, do you feel like this is the first time Washington's really had that type of player that could be a household name around the league?
Yeah, since Robert Griffin, which was 2012, and unfortunately he got hurt at the end of that year and never was the same. And before then, it's a different world. Robert was kind of the beginning of the new social media world among sports. So social media really made a change. And what I learned from Steve Guback, who covered this team for 25 years with the Washington Star through when it closed in 81, and I showed up a little later. Between the two of us, we got about 60 years. And I asked him, had he ever seen anything like this? He said, no, because it wasn't social media back then. It was just the day's newspaper. And so we didn't have this kind of thing before RG3. That was kind of the dawn of the new era of hysteria. I mean, you remember Robert Griffin. It was like the Beatles had landed. Remember those videos of women screaming,
Yeah.
at the Beatles? I mean, it was like that at practice at Richmond. Yeah, all you heard for 3 hours was RG3, or it never stopped. And I thought that's amazing. Now with Jayden, the crowd doesn't quite do that yet, at least,
Yeah.
but he's the next level of that. And now that media is so much bigger, widespread change, I expected him to be the most publicized, commander or Redskin ever.
Yeah, I think the thing with Robert that really kind of put him out a little bit more than say a Jayden, because we both can agree that Jayden's the better football player. We can see that already. But I think with Robert, you still had Snider as an owner where he wasn't beloved. As far as the coach, Mike Shanahan, Mike Shanahan is a Hall of Fame coach. We understand that, multiple Super Bowl winning coach, but Mike Shanahan really wasn't, and I think we both can say this, wasn't warm and fuzzy. by,
And, and that's why he's not in the Hall of Fame, is because he didn't know how to deal with the new athletes of the coming through. When I was a kid, if a coach told you to do something, that's what you did. That's what Shanny thought people would do. But Albert Haynesworth and Robert Griffin, they had different opinions. And today, I think that one of the greatest parts of Dan Quinn is that he knows how to talk to these 20 somethings. He knows how to engage them and get them to come up. It really, last year's coaching staff was a master class, I
yeah,
thought, in coaching. You take away Joe Gibbs, this was the best coaching staff I'd ever seen here.
yeah, without question. And I also will say this too, Rick. Uh, Dan knows how to speak to us. He's engaging. He talks to you by your first name. I mean, he literally takes the time to talk to you and not at you. And how many coaches have we seen come through here where they literally wanted you to know they were the smartest person in the room?
Oh yeah, most of them. And sometimes I had to beat it into them. They're not, but uh, you know, I like to fight away from the TV cameras. I didn't like to fight in front of them. But a lot of, yeah, I mean, Spurrier, he thought he was the smartest cat ever meowed, and and so does Shanny. Shanny thought, I've won Super Bowls, and he said, I bet my reputation on John Beck and Rex Grossman. Okay, well, you've lost, and you're not in the Hall of Fame because of how things handled here.
Yeah, and I'll never forget the days of him basically telling us, he kind of started this whole thing with, at least in this town, where, you couldn't film anything, you weren't allowed to tweet during practice. And he kept saying it takes away our competitive advantage. And I'm like, really? Because on Sundays, I don't really see an advantage. I see teams knowing exactly what you're going to do and they're stopping you. So, that's a story for another day. But when you look ahead now, let's talk about this team, the 2025 season coming up. The expectations are real now, Rick. I mean, what they did last year, they did it with kind of, with tape and band-aids. Let's just call it like it is. I think that this last year's team that went to the NFC Championship game, that's going to be the worst roster that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters probably will ever have. And yet they went to the NFC Championship game. So now, with the expectations being high, what are you foreseeing this year? What do you think should transpire for this football team?
The schedule is tough. I mean, it's always tough, but and tough in different ways. Like there'll be 5 road games that they'll land back at Redskin Park around 5 a.m. Okay. And that just kills your Monday right there in recovery and in the Madrid game and all that. Those are hard extras on there that are going to be tough. They play Christmas at 1 o'clock. You're not going to get a home crowd for that. I mean, they made them the media darlings, so you got to play. They don't play a 1 o'clock game in October or November. Those kind of things really wear on players' bodies on a long season.
Yeah.
So I think they'll still win 10 games or low. Last year they won 5 games on the last play.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a horseshoe in your pocket, to say it nicely. I mean, who does that?
No,
You can't do that every year. I mean, what's great is it did show that with Robert, you can always win a game, you
yeah.
know, and he did. And so that's what makes him dangerous. And you get in the playoffs, their best game of the season last year was Detroit, I thought. They looked awesome. And they were hanging in there with Philly until it got away from them at the end. But uh, I think they have a better team in some respects. The line's going to be better. So I'd like to think the running game will be better on that. Jayden can use the left side of the field more. Last year, he only threw from the left on scrambles less than 40%. I think they'll be able to balance that a little more because if you notice the end of last season, teams are waiting on the right side of the field for him.
The were. They,
They figured that out.
yeah.
So that's going to all help. People talk about Ertz getting old. No, I'm not letting go of Ertz, man. This dude's a baller
Yeah.
on there. He'll kick. I always said Ertz will slit your throat with a butter knife if that's what it takes to win. I mean, he's a baller. And the
And
defense,
you can tell Jayden has added life to his career.
yeah,
How he's not just at the end of the road in his mind. He's like, you know what? This guy makes me a better football player, and I make him a better football player. And then you think of the other weapons, bringing in Debo Samuel. I don't know how many people are underestimating that move. That is a huge move for this offense. And it's huge for Terry. You don't think Terry understands that, and there's a reason why he's wanting more money right now?
yeah. I mean, Debo could be their one. I mean, I watched him in these mini practices and all.
Look
He
like
looks good. People are watching film don't understand what they're looking at. He could really be it. Jayden looked terrific, I thought, in the camps. The one thing, even from last year, I noticed about Jayden, the ball's never on the ground. He's
never.
never, and so I watched him hit a lot of bang bang plays, and I know the defense is at a disadvantage, but he hits a high completion rate, at least 90% of balls, at least in practice. And he's good. And then defensively, what they decided to do was we're not going to worry about the pass rush as much because we were bolstering the secondary. Let's get the big dudes in the middle to stop these running backs from killing us. And so that's where they invested their money. So overall, it's a better team. I just don't know if it'll be more wins.
Yeah, no, I think we can agree that the division's going to be better. The Giants may be able to sneak 3, 4 more wins out than they did last year. I think that would get them to 7 wins. But that's the type of team that could steal a win off a good football team. And then of course the Cowboys. The Cowboys always have talent. They went out and got George Pickens. I thought they had a pretty decent draft on top of that, but we all know that they're going to have a first year coach ever in this league, and that's tough when you're in this division. So, but they still have the talent. So I think the division is going to be back, and I think the league thinks that as well. When was the last time we've heard talk of the NFC East being the NFC Beast like it used to be? We've always heard the NFC least over the past few years.
Yeah, I'd say late 80s probably because the Giants were real good too.
Yeah,
Cowboys were decent.
yeah.
Philly was the weakest team then. But yeah, those three off the Giants, Cowboys, and Redskins were kind of, and the 49ers pretty much were dividing up the league on there. So the thing about the old days of smash mouth football in the cold, now it's changed a bit, on there. I mean, it's nice to run, but Jaden's going to be the one that makes the difference here.
All right. So look, before we let you go, I do have to get your thoughts on this. Potentially, a stadium coming to DC and it'll be an indoor stadium. But what's your thoughts on that? Because being from Washington, I'm torn on it. I understand the need for it, and you can make money year round having an indoor facility. But man, it's just not what we're so accustomed to, in town.
Well, maybe, but I remember we used to be an open air press box at RFK, and it'd be 10 degrees colder in there, and there was no heat or AC. It was brutal. I used to cry at the end of games just typing with two fingers. I couldn't move anymore. So I was okay when we had an indoor press box. So I'm okay with an indoor stadium if I managed to make it to it. It's a win-win for everybody. Right now, politics is playing its role as it does, and it'll get there. It'll be there, and it'll be something for the next 50 years, to look at. This is a big deal. And the mayor of DC, who I like, is smart enough to say, this town is changing from a government town to some other things because of what they're doing with layoffs and downsizing government. So we need to figure out new ways to bring people here. Tourism, sports is always the biggest things. I'm also a tour guide in DC, so I see all this, and the stadium will be part of that. And it's going to be a beautiful thing. The problem I have with it only is it's going to be for rich folks. It ain't going to be for me because you'll be paying top dollar. I mean, PSLs that are going to be backbreakers for everybody. And I know Josh Harris got to get his money back. I'm a capitalist too, but it's going to be tough. You're going to see one or two games, not all the games. Rich people are going to be in those seats. So that's the one thing I don't like. I think you're making too big a playground in a way for the rich, but that's how life goes now.
Yeah, and you're right. You hit it head on. Think about what's going to come up in 2 years with Jayden Daniels. I know, people are under the impression that you still have 4 more years of a rookie deal to, play off of. No, you don't. He's going to be eligible in 2 more years after that third year for an extension. And you and I both know we're probably going to be looking at an NFL record salary if he continues to play like he did his rookie campaign. So yeah, the timing of the stadium with his contract, with the draft coming here in 2027, it's a lot happening for the Burgundy and Gold, more so than I can ever recall. And you do. I have to go back to my college years when they were winning Super Bowls. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden could be $100 million a year player, maybe.
It,
Wow.
it's fathomable. It really is to think
Yeah.
that NFL player, but they're starting to move. They're not NBA money yet, and they're not Major League Baseball money yet. But I think the league has such deep pockets. They make more money than the other leagues, ironically, in less games. I think these NFL players are going to have to start, beating on the table a little bit more to get a little bit more guaranteed money. And you and I both know that's what it boils down to. That's what's going on with Terry right now. It's not so much what I'm going to be making per year, it's the guaranteed money, the sign on money that these football players want because they're a play away from being taken away from them.
Yeah, I mean, he could go into this last year and play out his last year. Okay, then the team would have to franchise tag him. That's going to cost a lot of money. On Terry's end, though, he could get hurt in October and his career could be over. So
Exactly.
he wants the extension too. And so there's something for both sides. And I think they'll do it right on like the eve of camp. This will get done. The 49ers, where Adam Peters from, is used to doing late deals like this because you're going to pay him a big signing bonus. Well, you can keep that bonus in your bank for another month, and draw the interest before you give it to Terry.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you said that. I keep trying to tell people this is a normal occurrence, especially around the league. Didn't we see this last year with Sam Cosmi? We were sitting in that media tent, first day of training camp. Here comes Sam Cosmi. He got his extension. And I keep telling people that's what's going to happen to Terry. The question is, I think they're going to have to be in the 35 to 37 million a year range. If that's the case, that puts him at number three, number two, as far as the highest paid receivers. And I want fans to understand though, Rick, it's not saying that he's the second or third best receiver in the league. It's the market, and that's just the way these things go.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins kind of really showed us that a few years back, and he was talking about this 2 years of franchise tags, and he said, "I owe it to my fellow players to keep moving this up because we keep jumping the money up." Now Terry might be number two paid next year, but within 2 years he'll probably be out of the top 10 again.
That
That's how it'll go. Look at Bryce Harper's deal, in baseball. We thought, my God, it's a ton of money. It just keeps going and going. That's why the NFL is going to Europe and they're talking about playing a game in Australia now. They're trying to get the global money, global markets coming here. And the money is just insane, and now you got the sports betting, they get a piece of that. It used to be the players got 5 grand more or less for image rights. And that was for bubblegum cards, that kind of stuff. Now it's huge money that just is on the side for you, for your image, for the betting, even all that stuff. They get all that. So it's not even just your salary sometimes. It can be serious money, six figures easy. Some great player like Jayden will probably get over $1 million in that pool just for that. That's
Yeah.
side money away from the contract. So
Sheesh, side money. I mean, we need that.
I mean, you could live on the beach like you do, man. You're right by is that the Atlantic or Pacific behind you? I'm not sure.
That's the Atlantic.
Oh, okay.
The golf a week ago. So yeah, I'm globe trotting right now. But yeah, man. Look, Rick. As always, I and I've told you this before many times. I grew up, being a huge fan of yours, and to be able to be by your side sometimes out of practices and things like that, man, it just means so much. And you don't have a bigger fan than me. I love what you're doing. I'm a big historian, and you do all these great things around town. Can you tell us something that you have coming up that might be a shocker to some, as far as from the historical standpoint?
Well, I do have a new book coming out right when the season starts on Jayden Daniels in his rookie year. Triumph Publishing called me about a month ago and said, "Need a Jayden book in a month. See ya." And I'm like, "What?" Try to write a book in a month, but it's a short. It's got a lot of pictures. So that's going to be coming out right around the season starts. So if you can buy that, and but I do all kind of crazy stuff. Like I didn't plan this, but here's my latest book. It's Secrets of Caveman Cooking. You can get it on Amazon. I used to be a chef. You can get long ago.
They cook, man. I love cooking, so I gotta have that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do wide stuff. I like to have a varied life, and I'm nearing retirement, sort of. I keep saying that, but I like to do lots of different things. Tour guiding, I have fun with. I meet lots of great people from around the world on it, so I enjoy doing that. So I don't, unlike say Joe Gibbs, we used to laugh about, didn't know anything beyond the goalposts of life. I try to stay outside of things, and at least you're not this little. I hate when I get these old gray-haired bent over guys that go, "Yeah, I grew up reading you." Oh God, I mean, okay, I've been doing this 47 years since 1978, and I'm the senior dean now in town for a while. So um, I never even wanted to cover the Redskins, to be honest. I was covering horses early in my career, horse racing. I didn't want to cover Redskins. A lot of pressure, a lot of work, but it's where the money is, so that's why I'm here on there. But it's just funny I ended up here for so long that when old players come back, they don't know anybody else. They come see me
I
because
mean, you're here now, man, and you can't retire. I mean, let's be honest. This team should give you life like Zach Ertz. So
no,
you got to see another Super Bowl before you do that.
I did survive a massive heart attack at Redskin Park back in '02, and the trainer saved me. And I said, I don't know if this is my purgatory for a long time. It was like to wander this bad team, but now they're finally good. So I wanted to see some of the good stuff. That's why I'm sticking around because I grew up in this town. So I've watched the Redskins since '69 when Lombardi came. And, it's an honor to cover the team in a way. All my friends and family wouldn't know what to talk to me about if they didn't ask that. I've had that happen so much. I go to a family Christmas party, first seven questions. Do you think Kirk's going to resign? Seriously? How are you doing, cuz? I mean,
All the time, friend. It's literally, it's a good thing to be from the area covering your childhood team.
yeah.
Uh, it's also a curse at the same time because you're right. You can't go anywhere without someone asking you about the team, and they're going to hold you to your answer too. By the way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I kept telling people Jaden's going to be fine. He'll be fine. He made me look good on there. And then now that I have Rick Snider's Washington, it's on video, YouTube, and all the social medias. People come up to me all the time, which kind of freaks me out because I'm thinking they're going, Rick, Rick. And I'm thinking, who is this? I'm getting old. I can't remember everybody. And it's like, no, I don't know this person at all. They just come up to talk. And you can't be a jerk because then everybody tells, they'll tell you, I bet Rick, he was a jerk. So, that kind of thing. It's been, the video has been a new life and extension of my career because regular media is dying. Which all see it. Look at the Washington Post. They're under 100,000 papers now daily for the first time in decades.
Wow.
The media is crumbling, and it's things like what we're doing here is what people are watching.
Yeah, I mean that's what they want, man. I mean, and short attention spans nowadays too. So you can hit them with some good stuff and get out. Hey, real quick question, fun one for you because you are a historian. if there were a president from years past, or it could be the current president, which I doubt, but it could be from years past, that you think would make a great NFL quarterback, who would you throw out there?
Yeah, I mean Nixon was a big fan. He even drew up a play for the Redskins, and they lost. They lost yardage. They missed out the field goal, and it cost them the game. So thanks, Dick.
Are
Uh,
you serious?
yeah, yeah. And I've known people. I've interviewed all three people involved in the call, and they all deny, and they all point to each other like that was me. But yeah, Nixon's play lost 12 yards, pushed them out of field goal range. They lost the game. Yeah, it was something. LBJ in his youth, I bet, would have been really good. John Kennedy was a pretty athletic guy. Jerry Ford was a center on there. So some of the before we had such old people as presidents, some of these guys were pretty athletic on there. I mean, could Abe Lincoln have done it? I don't know. I don't think Abe Lincoln could move to his right very well.
Yeah, I think he would have probably been best suited for basketball, with this height.
Yeah, you could do that. Well, George Washington was 6'2" back when the average man was 5'6".
I was going to say he was considered a giant for his time. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, he's like Shaquille O'Neal today, compared to people. And he could drink like nobody you ever met. So
Oh, wow.
When I tell you about George, George got rich, the richest man in America through whiskey. After his presidency, he made whiskey at Mount Vernon. I've had it, the new but you know, the colonial people drank 3 times more alcohol than we do today because they couldn't trust the water. And George was a rager, is what this dude could drink,
Wow.
and everything. So,
He's
you
put.
know, that's a guy I'd love to meet sometime, but if we ever get there. But yeah, there's a lot of presidents that are small and meek, and yeah. I mean, James Polk, he wouldn't have got anywhere. Or, FDR couldn't. Herbert Hoover would have got knocked down. I
What
mean,
about a guy like McKinney? Kind of bigger guy. What would you say?
yeah, but he didn't handle. He got knocked out. Teddy Roosevelt would be a guy that he would be more for rugby. I think. He'd want to throw some elbows. There, Teddy Roosevelt would be pretty awesome. He's a very, very physical guy. Yeah, he's the guy that said, hit him with a big stick, kind of thing. So our president, I love presidents just because they're so random sometimes of how they won, how they became president. I mean, Garfield, who's a distant cousin of mine, I'm related to a few.
Oh, wow.
Garfield's calling the roll at the convention, trying to get a nominee. They're deadlocked for 3 days. They're deadlocked. They still got to have a nominee for president. So some wise guy just yells Garfield, and they all thought, all right, why not? He got elected instead. Just because they were deadlocked, they just wanted to go home. And Garfield ends up being president. Wasn't even running, So the randomness of the White House is really weird. I have a drinking book called Presidential Pours, and it's about every president's favorite drink. And so I went through them all, and Jimmy Carter turned out to be a big wine guy. I didn't think he drank at all.
Yeah, I would. That's shocking for me. I wouldn't have thought he would have had any drinks whatsoever.
Yeah, or Teddy Roosevelt was a mint julep guy, and I thought that's sissy drink. I mean, although it's a stiff drink, I'll say that. I covered the Kentucky Derby 20 years. It's a stiff drink, but
That's
it started here. It said presidents like to drink. I even do a tour of that. I love presidents just because it's kind of like even head coaches too. Sometimes you wonder what, like Brian Schottenheimer is going to be coaching the Cowboys. Now I remember him here as the son of Marty. He was
Mhm.
just getting started, back then. Marty was a very good coach, and Snyder screwed that up big time. They would have
Yeah,
been a good team with him.
doing something with him after that first year. I think they won like their last six or something like that, right?
Went 8-3. I remember that how
Mhm.
they did it. But, Marty started 0-5, and Snyder already decided to fire him. He just waited till the end of the year, and it was like, wait a minute, things changed. And Marty was tough, like Shanahan kind of thing. I mean, Bruce Smith wanted to go to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony for Marv Levy, and it was going to be a Saturday rookie practice, so he wouldn't want to have to do anything. Marty wouldn't let him go. And the next day, Bruce gets a shoulder injury and misses the rest of camp. So,
Irony in that, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
who knew?
remember, Marty won with what? Tony Banks. I mean, come on, man. Like, no offense to Tony Banks, but you know, he won with pretty much just tough nosed players. And I'll always remember the one player that came from Marty's just seeing things was Antonio Pierce. and
Mhm.
this team never re-signed him, and he went to New York and won some Super Bowls, and the rest was history.
Yeah, there's Marty was a good coach. He was a pain in the butt, but he was a good coach. And he and Dion didn't see eye to eye, and Jeff George got cut after 2 or 3 games. I mean, that was Marty did Marty wasn't afraid to make big moves with people. I'll say that. And Dion wanted to go back and play for a playoff team at the end of a season, and Marty blocked him, wouldn't let him go because he stiffed Marty for for playing for him. That earlier they had a secondary of Dion, Champ Bailey, and Daryl Green together for a little, for a year. Think of
Yeah.
that.
Was Mark Carrier on that squad?
Carrier was a 2000 team, so yeah, I think he was. I think he was that year. And he unfortunately kept spearing people, so they had to ban him
Yeah,
from the
exactly.
National League. I didn't think it was fair, but
Carrier. Well, look, Rick, man, I could do this all day. I mean, I love history. I love, not just football history, but history in general. It's important for people to know stuff, and you're the guy. You're the guy that if you need any kind of historical context on anything, that's what we do. So I got to get you back on here real soon. Especially since training camp's coming up. I know a couple years ago we actually did a show from training camp, so if you're game for that again, we can do it again this year.
all right, if it's not 100 degrees, I swear
Well, we were under the tent, remember that?
I don't look good at 100 degrees. So
Now, if they have the tent over us, we can do it again. So we'll see. We'll see if they put up the stands and stuff like they did last year. It was hot, man. It really was. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll get in front of a fan.
who doesn't want to sit on metal bleachers in 100-degree weather?
You said that. I didn't say that.
Bring your towel for sitting on, not, waving. It was, but at least they have them. You're not standing on a hillside, can't see anything.
Yeah, but
They're gonna stay there, I think, for a little while.
yeah, we heard the moans behind us though out there where people were getting burnt on those metal stands. So that's a whole nother story. So hopefully they have awnings or something like that over them this year because yeah, people were getting singed up. They were like in a frying pan.
I'll go to the rich people section where you sit, and maybe you can save me a seat. And
No, come on, man. None of that.
I just wave up to like that's it, man. That's all we do.
Well, look, my friend, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll be doing this again real soon. But as always, I appreciate everything you do, man. And no talk of retirement. We're not doing that. No way.
Yeah, I was like, all right, man. Thanks for having me.
Okay, take care, my friend. All right.